All right. I think we're ready to get started. Can everybody hear me? All right. This is Badass 101. I assume that most of you are here because sex robots would be too difficult to explain to your manager. So I hope that Badass 101 is slightly less awkward. My name is Lyndsey Padget. I'm a senior software engineer for a company called Freightview in Kansas City, Missouri. That is right in the middle of the United States. We have a web-based solution that helps small to medium-sized businesses manage freight online, as you can imagine by the name. So I'm a developer. I have a degree in computer science. I did Java for many years, and then I switched over to JavaScript. And so I mostly am a back-end developer. I do Node.js for the most part, RESTful design, and microservices are sort of my jam. So I want to get into some disclaimers. We won't be talking about any code today. Hopefully you've had your fill of that by this point. You're at the last session, so you've hopefully learned a lot. What we are going to be discussing, though, is feelings. Ugh. Like human emotions. It's going to get weird. And, if that weirds anyone out, I understand. I just wanted to warn you ahead of time. And speaking of things that might make you feel uncomfortable, I tend to curse sometimes. It's just naturally part of how I speak, and I hope it doesn't offend anyone. It's not intended to, but, you might hear a word now and again. And then I also wanted to mention that neither I nor my employer nor the NDC Conferences is responsible for any sort of rage quit that might result from watching this talk today. That's not my intention. My goal is to motivate you, it's to inspire you, to get you really jazzed about what you do every day, because that's how I feel when I go to work every day. And so I don't want to discourage you in the least. But, if angry rants laced with expletives is really your thing, then you should check me out at PubConf tonight. I will be there giving a more ranty version of this talk with a different set of slides that is wholly inappropriate, and it should be a really good time. There are quite a few other talented speakers there as well. So I want to start off by saying that I didn't call this talk How to Be a Badass, because I don't believe that that is a thing that you can simply accomplish so easily, right? Building badassery is a journey. It's not a destination. The closest comparison I can make is that it's much like getting in shape. It's becoming fit and staying fit. You don't just do that overnight, and you shouldn't expect to become a badass overnight. You can't come into a session at a conference, leave in an hour, and say, ta-da, I'm a badass. Your coworkers would look at you a bit strange. So the first step, though, in becoming a badass, as far as I'm concerned, is recognizing that you have a brand. And if you don't like the word brand, maybe think of it as reputation. Everyone has a reputation, no matter what they do. And you might think, well, I'm a code monkey. I just sit and I code in my cubicle all day long, and I'm happy doing that. And I don't see why I have to prove myself to anyone on the internet or in my office. And that's understandable. I actually did that for many years. I was sort of off the grid, and I thought, I'm going to let my skills do the talking, But the truth is that the way you are perceived can, both in the workplace and out of the workplace, can really impact the kinds of opportunities that you're presented with. And it certainly impacts how people treat you, whether they respect you or not, and what they say to your face and when you're away, right? So we all have the issue of how we are perceived. And so when you're talking about building a brand for yourself, I'm generally speaking in terms of things like LinkedIn, building your CV, maybe your GitHub presence, and then most importantly, actually, is how you interact with your coworkers on a day-to-day basis. this is a good opportunity to remind you guys that software is intended to help human beings. You know, as developers, we're pretty lucky to do what we do every day. And I meet so many people who really just enjoy the process of learning. And hopefully that's why you're here, right? We all want to learn. We all want to grow. We want to gain new skills. And I get that, and that's great. You should learn, right? You should continue to learn. Otherwise, you will get stale in this industry. But I think sometimes we can become a bit addicted to the learning. We have to remember that the software we're building is for humans. It's to help them do their jobs better, or it's to make their lives better in some way. And I think it's more useful at times to consider how we fit into the betterment of society than to always focus on me and what I'm learning all the time, right? Unfortunately, as you're probably quite aware, you are a human, and I am also human, so as humans, I feel like I can relate to you in this way. It's sort of an issue where we have some maintenance requirements, some flaws, if you will. We are not perfect beings, as much as we hate to admit it. So let's talk a little bit about some of our flaws. First, simply just remember that we're instruments in our social groups, right? Whether that's at work, at your organization, you are an instrument to their goals and what they want to accomplish. Or if it's in your home life, if you have a family with small children, you are an instrument in your family circle. Your instrumentality is to help your family reach its goals, right? To take care of your children, to help your spouse, etc. Your energy is finite. As much as we hate to admit it, we all need sleep. And listening to your body is something that always felt very touchy-feely to me. It's like, oh, listening to my body, like hippie jargon. But in reality, you have to be able to know when your mind is not functioning at its highest capacity, right? There is a point, I'm sure we've all had experiences like this, where we're coding late into the night. And even if you think, oh, I'm a night owl, I love this, I'm going to be up all night, this is great. I think because we enjoy what we do, we tend to get, again, carried away with it. And you simply can't sustain that for long periods of time. Besides sleep, you have other maintenance requirements. This includes things such as food, which I should be clear, not just food, but nutrition, okay? Mountain Dew and Cheetos doesn't count. Yeah, so that's something to be aware of as well. You have to fuel your body appropriately, even if you aren't going out on a bike ride every day or going for a run every day. Maintaining proper nutrition is, again, fueling your brain. And that's what we're getting paid to do, is use our brain to build amazing things. You are illogical. And it sort of is a segue, because if you are not getting your maintenance requirements met, such as food and sleep, you become more illogical. The decisions that you make are more likely to be wrong or nonsensical at all. And so again, listening to your body, knowing when you've reached that point is critical, because you start writing code and maybe you come in the next day and you're like, who wrote this? This is ridiculous. Oh yeah, that was me at 3 a.m. So even if you have met all your maintenance requirements, you're well fed, you're well rested, it is still quite likely that you don't know everything. And so it's really helpful both for yourself and for your coworkers to remember that humans are just trying the best that they can with what they have. The information that they have is limited, and you can only make a decision based on what you know. And so we need not beat ourselves up for potentially bad decisions. And the same goes for our coworkers when they make a decision that sort of backfires. Finally, life is not fair. Even if you work hard and you deserve a promotion, it's possible that your coworker might get the promotion, and you might not understand why that is. And it might even be true that your coworker truly does not deserve the promotion, right? You win some, you lose some, is how I have to view it. There are opportunities that occur for you that may not occur for other people, and it's probably a completely different talk to talk about socioeconomic status and race and gender and how all of those things factor in. But the truth is, we're all different, and the best thing you can do is be aware of how you are being perceived and treat others with respect so that you maximize your opportunities. But it's still no guarantee, because I think we all know that that coworker who got promoted and didn't deserve it, or perhaps in personal lives, you know a guy who has a beautiful, smart wife and you have no idea how that happened. So we have to handle our exceptions, if you will. First and foremost, just acknowledging, being constantly aware of all the limitations I just mentioned is extremely important. Again, that's sort of like listening to your body, or knowing when you've had enough, or setting boundaries for yourself to know that, okay, I've had a 9-hour workday, or however long. I've worked one extra night this week. I'm done now, right? That being said, it's really important, I think, to separate a bit personal life and work life. The best example I can think of is, a coworker who might be late to a meeting. And the coworker comes in, maybe this has been you before, I think we've all been in this situation. It's like, oh, I'm so sorry, I missed the train, or I have a flat tire. Let me tell you all about it. I'll start from the beginning. See, first I woke up, and then I went to the train, but it was late, and so actually I tried to catch this other train, but the B train, it routed around the city, and it's like, you know what? I don't care. Nobody cares. Just say you're going to be late. That's fine. If somebody asks you, then you explain the whole story. So a big part of having your shit together is just knowing how much information is appropriate. I always err on the side of caution. I always say, I'm going to be 5 minutes late to the meeting. That's it. That's a pretty good way of just summarizing the information that the other person needs to know and care about. So who here is familiar with the term duck typing? You guys? Okay. You guys know what it is. So the concept, of course, is that in programming, you have an object, your function takes an object, and you have to figure out what that object is. You try to duck type it, meaning if it walks like a duck, talks like a duck, must be a duck. So you try to determine, does that thing fit in certain categories, which is, ironically, what people do when they meet other people. In fact, most of the time, this happens within the first few minutes of meeting someone new. They try to figure out you as a person, put you in a nutshell, and tuck you into a nice category and say, yeah, you're this kind of person. Okay, that makes sense to me. And it's quite difficult for them to manage, a relationship with you if they don't understand what kind of person you are. If they are really confused about what category you go in, it's like, I don't have a box for that. I'm not quite sure. So I like this picture because I feel like it encapsulates how we should view ourselves within our companies. Really any kind of social group. You might have a religious organization or a large family, and so, you want to conform, but yet not. You want to adapt to the company's culture so that you're relatable and they kind of understand you. They know what box to put you in. And obviously, because if there are certain rules and things, you have to conform to that. But you also want to express your individuality. And the reason why I like this photo is because all of these ducks are unique. They're expressing their uniqueness, and yet they're all still ducks. So I like to remind myself of that, and I've not always been successful at it. I tend to think that I have a lot of enthusiasm as an employee. And so my biggest hurdle is when I start at a new company and I come in and I'm like, I'm going to do everything. This is going to be awesome. Get out of my way. And people don't really like that, as I've learned. They understandably want me to, get the lay of the land before I start going around and changing everything. So everybody has their own unique challenges, but that's mine. So here's an example. This kind of goes back to the marketing yourself. So this is a screenshot of someone named John Smith. Don't worry, I changed his name to protect the innocent. LinkedIn screenshot showing that he's a contractor. It shows the contracting firm. And VML is the company. It's a company I used to work for. So, I look at this, and I'm not a recruiter. I don't know, technically what is most eye-catching. But I can tell you one thing. John Smith doesn't care. That's what I get from that screenshot. I don't see that he's a very enthusiastic person. And maybe that's not a fair assumption, but it's the conclusion I'm going to draw when I view this image, right? Conversely, here's an example of how John Smith, very handsome guy from stock photo website, he's now a bit more specific about what he does. He's not just a contractor, because who knows what that does. Contractor could do anything. Usually does everything from what I've seen. And specifically now he's saying that he's an application developer. Oh, well, that helps. What kind of apps do you build? Like, that's a great starting question for someone who's viewing this. And, it doesn't even specify that he's a contractor, because as far as I'm concerned, that's an arrangement of payment or schedules. It's an employment agreement, right? He's working at VML, and he's specifically doing application development. That tells somebody a lot more about this person. So as far as photos go, too, I just wanted to mention, I know that some people have good reasons for not sharing a photo, and that's understandable, but I tend to believe that people want to connect, right? They want to connect with other people, and seeing a photo helps them understand who this is. It puts a face with the name, and it becomes much harder to sort of dismiss this person and think, oh, he's a real person. I want to meet this real person. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about the very fine line that exists between an asshole and a badass, because I think that the two sometimes get confused. So here are a few traits, some traits we're going to scroll through about the difference between the two. An a-hole talks a lot, but a badass mostly listens. An a-hole complains, whereas a badass seeks solutions. And that can be a fine line too, right? I think we've all had situations where we complain and we think, no, I'm trying to help find a solution. Really? Which solution did you offer? Because it sounded like you were just complaining, right? It's tough, and sometimes that complaining can lead to a solution, but we have to be cautious of, again, how we're being perceived. An a-hole grumbles when there's a problem, and a badass voices concerns appropriately. I had a situation once where it was like a large town hall style meeting at a big company I was working for. And the CEO and all of the executives are up on the stage, and there's, Q&A time. A guy raises his hand in the back and says, "When am I going to get my parking spot back?" It's like, well, I'm not sure. Let me look into that. It might have been a perfectly legitimate concern, right? But that certainly wasn't the time to air that grievance. And it wasn't perceived well by his coworkers, as you can imagine. An a-hole interrupts people, and a badass controls the floor. That's a really important one for me. Interrupting occasionally, very, very occasionally, can seem collaborative. Like, oh, yeah, I know what you're trying to say. Yeah, me too, or simply confirmation. Like I've had a coworker who says, yep, yep, yeah. So, is that interrupting? I'm not sure. It's something to be cautious about, I will say that. And because I don't like to be interrupted, I have a technique that I use. And I noticed after encountering quite a few people who have tried to interrupt me over time that they stop doing it once they realize that I'm not going to allow myself to be interrupted. So my technique is simply to talk louder. They start talking, and I'm like, oh, let me continue talking. But I do make sure then to give them the floor. That's why I say controlling the floor, because it's really important that they have time to speak also. I don't want to dominate the conversation. I simply want to let them know that I wasn't finished talking, but soon it will be their turn, right? So I also saw a session recently on conflict resolution with your coworkers, which was fascinating. A lady named Lauren Schiffer back in the States does that talk. And she mentioned that it helps generally in relationships with your coworkers if you always let them start first. Generally speaking, you will more likely have the last word in the conversation. And not only that, you will learn where they stand on an issue. So I think we should have tabs, not spaces. How do you feel about that, right? It immediately lets them know that you care about what they have to say, except you don't care. And then you say what you want, and oh, well, that's the last thing that was said. So that sounds a bit manipulative, but it truly is important to help people to have your coworkers know that you really do value what they have to say. I think in that case, Lauren was specifically talking about a manager who has already made a decision and yet wants their direct reports to feel that they have input on that. And not only that, but maybe it's an opportunity for her to change her mind, right? Like, I'm thinking about doing this, but let's see if anyone objects. If they have a good reason, I might change my mind. So, very, very important. An a-hole is self-centered, and a badass understands his or her instrumentality. So again, the community that you belong to, how you fit in, and what the goals are. An a-hole is complacent, and a badass is tenacious. I had a boss who used to call me persistent Padget because I would not give up asking him until I got what I wanted. An a-hole fights for his own needs, really only cares about himself. A badass fights for the needs of his or her team. An a-hole makes excuses, and a badass admits fault. And that's extremely important if you're leading a group of people, to have the accountability that if something goes wrong on the team, it's my fault, right? Even if it wasn't your fault, you accept the fault and you admit it when necessary. An a-hole flakes out, and a badass follows through. An a-hole commits on behalf of others, whereas a badass only commits for themselves. And I believe that that's one of the reasons Agile has gained such popularity, is because it puts the commitment in the hands of the team. Before that, there was a lot of committing on behalf of others. Like, yeah, my team will do that. It'll take 6 months, Whereas Agile not only breaks down that work so that it's easier to estimate it, it also then puts it in the laps of the developers and says, well, how long do you think this will take, right? Which is really, really important. An a-hole trusts no one, but a badass trusts but verifies. An a-hole procrastinates, and a badass makes a plan and then executes the plan. An a-hole puts others down versus a badass who lifts others up, mostly by action, not by words. An a-hole gossips. I'm sure none of us have ever done that, right? A badass remains focused, doesn't get distracted by the rumors around the office. An a-hole expects others to carve a path, and a badass continually improves and grows regardless of the path in front of them. So I want to talk a little bit about appearance now. Unfortunately, a lot of people, even still in this day and age, have this picture come to mind when you might say, I'm a computer programmer, or I'm a developer. This is what they think of. And I can assure you that no one in this room hates this stereotype more than me. So I'd like to change the way that our field is perceived. I will admit that this is a bigger problem in the States than it is here. You guys are much more stylish and conscious of, hygiene and things. But, far be it from me to dictate how anyone should dress or groom themselves. But I do think it's important that we all look like we got ready on purpose. That we didn't just roll out of bed and show up for work and say, I'm here, you're welcome, So a badass owns the look. I don't care if you are wearing sneakers and a t-shirt and a pair of jeans. You should look pulled together. I don't care if you have a beard. You should look like you have a beard on purpose. Does anyone know, can anyone guess who this is? Santa Claus. That's right. Or julenissen? Yeah. In Norwegian, yeah. This is Santa Claus. Or Sinterklaas is the other one I know in Dutch. This is Yorkdale Fashion Santa, which is a campaign that was put on by the Yorkdale Mall in Toronto. It's a very posh mall. And it was wildly successful. I mean, look at this guy. He's amazing. He does not have time for your bullshit. He's a busy guy. Women want to be with him. Men want to be him. He actually had lines out the door. You had to schedule an appointment to come see the fashion Santa Claus at Yorkdale Mall. So I like this because it shows pretty clearly, admittedly just men's fashion, that you can wear jeans and look pulled together. You can wear a scarf. You can wear a leather jacket. Just look like you care. A badass puts number one first. And so I like to call this the oxygen mask principle. That if you're not helping yourself, you're not helping anyone else. Again, that goes back to those requirements we talked about. If you're not getting your needs met, then you're not going to be very useful to your organization, to your family. And I want to go further to say that it's not just the bare minimum requirements, right? I think that's kind of where the line is drawn. I have food, and I have sleep, so I'm good. I don't need to have fresh air or exercise or, peace and quiet at home or whatever it is. Whatever it is you like to do. Go have a beer with your friends, go play some sports. Those are the things that keep us well-rounded and happy individuals. And so it's really important to carve out time for that. And to me, the calendar is king. If it's not on my calendar, it likely doesn't happen. And so if something is important to me, I will put it on my calendar, block that time off, and say, this is my time to read, because I enjoy reading. Working out is the same thing. I go to the gym every Monday and Friday, and then I work out on the weekends. And somebody says, oh, I need to have a meeting with you Friday at noon. I'm like, I'm sorry. How about Friday at 3? And they'll say, oh, yeah, no problem. I don't change that schedule. So that's important. A badass commands respect. One of the things that I love about Chuck Norris and the characters that he plays, and a lot of other fictional characters as well, is he demands respect through silence. So if you've noticed, like the paw on Little House from the Prairie is another great example, right? Powerful people tend to say little. And I've found that people generally value what I have to say more when I speak less often. And so that's something to remind myself. Every time I open my mouth and I'm about to say something, is it worth saying? Does it help or hurt me, right? And many times it's not necessary. So generally speaking, you command respect by remaining silent more often. On the other hand, lighten up. You know, a badass is also approachable. There is a fantastic book called No One Understands You and What to Do About It by Heidi Grant Halverson. She explains the dichotomy or the combination of competence and warmth. That if you have those two things in the workplace, you seem competent, you can get work done, but at the same time, you're a warm, caring person. That is a very powerful, magical combination. And that's how you tend to move up within the organization, is that people really put a lot of trust in you. This is a quadrant system that was developed by Kim Scott. I believe she worked at Google. She has since, this was originally on a blog post, and she has since posted or published a book by the same name called Radical Candor. This quadrant system is excellent, I think, for categorizing relationships between two people. So from your perspective, you can imagine that the y-axis is caring personally about someone. So at the top, you care about them a lot. At the bottom, not at all. And on the x-axis, challenging them directly. So this person we're talking about, do you challenge them when appropriate? Or do you just remain overly silent, right? You just let them do whatever they want, no matter how ill-advised. Radical candor is where you want to be. That quadrant means that you are challenging someone to grow, to be a better person, to question their own decisions, but in a way that is respectful and timely. If you don't care about them, but you do challenge them, then you fall into the obnoxious aggression category. And I think we've all had coworkers like that. Someone who just likes to argue, it seems. The other quadrant adjacent is ruinous empathy. So that's where you care about someone, but you don't challenge them. And so in a way, you're enabling potentially poor behaviors, right? A friend who drinks too much, let's say, you just let them. Like it's how they are. I've had a great many people in my life say, well, this is just how I am. What a sad statement. It means that they're never going to grow or change. And I'm not the one to tell them that they should change, but I like to grow and change. And so that kind of a statement is quite defeatist, I think. Manipulative insincerity is, of course, the worst category to be in, where you don't challenge anyone and you don't care about them either. So the link there is live. I'll post these slides later, by the way, through Twitter. And you can get a link to Kim Scott's book there. So I have an audio clip here. This is another fantastic book called You Are a Badass. I actually read it after I made the title for this talk. But Jen Sincero is the author. This was a rare few set of books that changed my life for the better. So I'll play it for you now. Hopefully audio is on.
This is what it means to make a decision for reals. When you make a no-nonsense decision, you sign up fully and keep moving towards your goal regardless of what's flung in your path. And stuff will most definitely get flung, which is why making the decision is so crucial. This shit is not for sissies. The moment it gets hard or expensive or puts you at risk of looking like a moron, if you haven't made the decision, you will quit. If it wasn't uncomfortable, everyone would be out there all in love with their fabulous lives. So often we pretend we've made a decision when what we've really done is signed up to try until it gets too uncomfortable. Henry Ford didn't even make it past the 6th grade, and there he was, bossing around a bunch of the world's biggest engineering smarty-pantses, setting himself up to look like a total idiot by spending large amounts of money and time on the proven impossible. Ford was determined, and he trusted his gut and his vision more than the small thinking of others. He'd made the decision that he would have his engine the way he would have it, and nothing was going to stop him. This is why the decision is so important. If you had an idea and had to go up against a room full of people who quote-unquote knew better than you did and demand they do what you say in spite of all the proof they had against you, would you stick to your guns? Or if you needed tens of thousands of dollars to start your new business, and the only person you could think of to ask was your scary, rich uncle who never remembered who you were even though you saw him every Christmas, would you ask him for it? Or if you were sick of feeling fat and unsexy and out of shape, and the only time you could make it to the gym was at 5 a.m. on freezing winter mornings when you were all snugly in bed, would you go? If you made the decision that you were going to reach your goals, you would do whatever it took. If you merely wanted to, but hadn't made the firm decision to, you'd roll over and begin convincing yourself that your life is fine just the way it is.
Damn. That's what I thought when I listened to this audiobook in the car. That's what we call driveway moment, where I just had to hit repeat a few times and be like, wow, that resonated with me. Probably because I used to try to work out in the mornings, and I would hit the snooze button and go back to sleep. That's why I work out at lunch now. So to clarify, to put a finer point on it, a badass is not a mean person. You don't have to be mean in order to be considered a badass. You don't have to be rude. You don't have to be an unfeeling robot. Like I mentioned, warmth is an extremely important part of the equation. A badass is not a manager. A badass can be a manager, but it's not a position you hold. And I know a lot of developers who haven't moved up the ranks in the company's corporate career ladder, and I consider them to be badasses. So it has nothing to do with your title. Badass is not rich. That's another common misconception. It's quite easy if you're rich to look pulled together, to have people waiting on you or a fancy car, and it gives the illusion that you're a badass, but in reality, it actually has nothing to do with money. It's all about the way that you carry yourself. And so when we think about a nice car or nice clothes, that simply gives you the confidence to feel good about yourself. But you don't need those things, right? It's the emperor's new clothes. You don't need to have those nice clothes, but when you put them on, you stand tall. And that's really what being a badass is all about. A badass is not popular. You don't have to be the most, outgoing person at a party. So, I also want to say that the word sorry comes up a lot. And there's this illustration. It's actually just by this Chinese guy, I think. He goes by that Twitter handle there, which will take you to his Twitter, or the hashtag, I guess. But he does these little drawings, and this is a great one. This is just a clip of the overall comic strip. But we need to be cautious about how we use the word sorry, how and when we apologize. Sorry is to be reserved for certain cases when you really, truly are sorry, right? I had a friend back in Kansas City who gave a keynote speech. And I completely spaced. I missed her keynote. I think I woke up too late. I got there when I got there, and I was like, oh, when are you speaking? She's like, I already spoke. That was a bad friend moment for me. And later, not in the hustle bustle of the conference, but later on, I went to her in a private moment and I said, I am so sorry that I missed your talk. It's, I was disappointed. I didn't mean to. Please accept my apology. That's the kind of thing you're sorry for. Sorry for being late. That's really more like, thank you for your patience. So this comic strip, I encourage you to check it out through that link there. It's more about replacing sorry with thank you. Thanking people for their patience and their understanding when you feel bad about a situation. Time is finite. That's something we all kind of have to remember. You're going to die someday. I'm sorry to break it to you. We all will. So it's really important that we respect our time. We use our time wisely. And this is a system developed by President Dwight D. Eisenhower back in the States. He developed this to categorize all of the things that he had to do on any given day. So you've got important and not important, and you've got urgent and non-urgent. Can you guys tell I like quadrants? Now, I think he actually had notes, and he pasted them up in the quadrants. I have a color coding system. I use a notes app on my phone to keep track of all the things I need to do, and I categorize them by color, and each color corresponds to a quadrant. And it's kind of important to realize that your task list is never ending. You will never get to the bottom of all the things you have to do. Your to-do list will just keep growing and growing. But the things that are important and urgent obviously need to get done urgently, as you can imagine. From that point, it's a bit difficult to figure out, are they urgent and not important, or important but not urgent? So that's a pretty careful distinction that we need to make with the tasks that fill our to-do list. As developers, I think we have a tendency, I know I do, to start things and then almost when we're finished with them, find something shiny to go do instead. New technology is like that, right? I've mastered this one, And especially if you're thinking about the learning part, you think, yeah, I've mastered it. It doesn't matter. I've mostly got this done. Somebody else can finish it, or I'll finish it later. And what that means is that you have a lot of balls in the air, right? And it's a much nicer feeling to stop starting and start finishing. No is a complete sentence. You don't have to explain the no. I suppose you can if someone asks, right? So your son has a birthday party on Friday night, and your boss really wants you to come to some sort of social hour for your work. You could say, I'm sorry, but I can't. If you're not sorry, just say, no, I won't be able to make it. Again, separating work and personal life means that you don't need to go into all the details about why you don't want to or can't go. There's a shirt I really like. It says, sorry I'm late, I didn't want to come. And I've really had to restrict myself from buying it, but that's sort of how I feel sometimes, right? And I've found that good friends and good coworkers understand that I have another life that doesn't involve them. They understand that I can't be all places and all times, and so they'll let me know if something is critical for me to be a part of it. Otherwise, I'll see. I'll commit if I truly want to commit, but I won't commit out of obligation. And so remember that when you say no, you're also saying yes. You're saying yes to yourself, your own desires and what you want. You're saying yes to people that are close to you, people you care about. And you're saying yes to causes that you care about. This might be volunteering. This might be religious organizations, other kinds of social groups that aren't work. That's pretty much all I have. I was going to do a Q&A, and I thought, well, Chuck Norris wouldn't have a Q&A. So if you do have questions, feel free to come approach me after all the wild applause that I'm sure we'll have. So thank you very much.